if I certainly got to the point at home when I would play a show in Melbourne, and they would be like, "And do we have to come to this one, or do you want us to?"
Oh.
Which I love. I mean, I like that. They're just very relaxed about the whole thing.
Well, this podcast is all about you, your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new record.
Great.
Awesome. Born and raised in Melbourne. Is that what I read?
Yeah, Melbourne. Very, very well done. You said that before.
I have. I've met a few people from Melbourne, and a lot of people. Melbourne.
Yeah,
Not going to cut it, but I always get complimented on knowing how to say it correctly.
No, it's impressive. I would accept Melbourne. I think it's just the quickness of the second syllable. It's just Melbourne. That's very obviously you've never been there.
Right. I've never been there either. I actually used to work with a guy from there. So I'd hear him say Melbourne all the time. And then it landed, it stuck. And now I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
What was it like growing up there?
Growing up in Melbourne. I love Melbourne. Melbourne's like, how do I describe Melbourne? As a city, I always say Sydney's, because Sydney and Melbourne are like really the only two cities in Australia that you need to know about. If Sydney's the hottest person at a party, Sydney's the hot person at a party, and Melbourne's the most interesting person at a party.
Okay.
So certainly as a musician, Melbourne was the best place to kind of incubate as a young artist, because I think it's cold. There's not a lot to do. So everyone's a bit more thoughtful and creative. And like Sydney, everyone's just surfing and it's sunny and beautiful. But Melbourne's like where all the authors and poets and depressed artists live. So it was the perfect environment for me to kind of hone my craft as a singer-songwriter.
Okay.
And yeah, audiences, are just really receptive to like going out and seeing live music and stuff. So growing up in that environment was great. My parents are musicians.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a good environment to grow up amongst.
Yeah, were they still doing it when you were born?
No, so by the time I was born, I mean, they are still like singers, but by the time I was born, they were very involved in church and like they would play music, but only in the context of church. And then
because they were in like a pop band, right?
That's right. In Indonesia, before me and my siblings were born, my mum's Australian, but she lived in Indonesia where she met my dad, and they were pop stars. They have a song. Even now, like most people don't know who my parents are, but if you sing the song, you could grab anyone on the street in Indonesia and they will know the song that my parents sang.
That's so cool.
It's quite funny.
I'm sure you've been, I would imagine.
I have been, yeah. I think that my parents are in the Indonesian Rolling Stone Hall of Fame.
No way. You should strive for that as well. Then you can be, parents and their
yeah.
That would be awesome.
I need to chase that down. Yeah, I need to get an Indonesian publicist onto it. Yeah, so I've been there a couple of times. But it's funny. I don't think I grew up knowing about my parents being famous, but like in Indonesia, but it didn't really sink in like how kind of significant their music career there was until I was like in my 30s. Like I was much older.
Really? Was there like a moment, or did you go there?
Oh, I think I just grew up and it was a fact of our lives. And it wasn't until I was like fully in the swing of my music career that I was like, okay, wait, like when you say you guys like had a big song, and then I would just like researched it and looked and I was like, oh, like you were famous.
Yeah. You had like a smash.
Yeah. Like, cause I guess when you're a kid, you just that stuff just doesn't register. You're like, oh yeah, that's just like my parents. That was their job or whatever. Like before.
Right.
So like there was always just these photo albums of them singing at like big festivals and stuff, but none of it registered that it was a big deal until I was, playing festivals. And then I was like, oh, you guys have done all this, which is funny then, like with their relationship to my music career is quite funny because they are both very excited about everything that's going on, but also I just get extremely detailed like feedback from them because they're musicians.
Oh, okay.
Like if I show them a demo or something, my mom's always more emotional feedback, but still will be like, there's not enough passion in your vocal on this. And then my dad will say things like, yeah, I don't know about that. The snare feels like it's been mixed in a weird way in that song. And I'm just like, guys,
Do you take any of it and bring it back to the
No,
mixer,
of
or no,
course not.
you
No.
just go, okay, yeah, we'll look into
My
it.
favorite was one where I sent them like a link to Spotify to like, oh, this song just came out. But I don't think I specifically said the song just came out. I just sent them the link and was like, hey, here's my new song. And my dad was like, this is great, but I actually think you should pitch this one up like a semitone. I think that you can really hit that note better. And I was like, Dad, this is out. This is done. Like,
the record is done.
Yeah, this is not an opportunity for you to give me like feedback. And then he was like, oh, in that case, I love it. It's perfect.
Oh, that's hilarious. Were they skeptical about you pursuing a career in music?
No, that's one thing that's great. I think my dad, Indonesians are so musical, and they're also like, they're not that kind of Asian cliche of like forcing their kids to like be high achievers. So my dad and my parents are just like chill people. So they were like, you don't want to go to university? Don't you have to do that? You don't want to do this? Like, don't you want to pursue music? Go for it. Like they just were always pretty relaxed about that stuff.
That's cool.
So yeah, but then with that comes like they definitely if I certainly got to the point at home when I would play a show in Melbourne and they would be like, and do we have to come to this one or do you want us to which I love. I mean, I like that. They're just very relaxed about the whole thing.
That's cool. They're like, so you said it's on Tuesday?
Yeah, that's right. And they were never as blunt as I just made it. It would more be like, and did you want us at this one, or is this one that you don't really need us? And I was like, it's fine, guys. You can stay home. I don't need you.
Okay, that's pretty funny. So when they moved to back to Australia, Australia, when you guys were they had you, and that's when they got back involved in the church, or were they always involved in the church? And
they were not always. They became Christians in Indonesia, had very sort of radical experience, and they weren't raised as Christians, but had like a radical conversion. Then moved to Australia, and for sort of kind of entertained a music career in Australia, but then got involved in this sort of very intense church that was filled with like university students in the 80s.
Okay.
And then just sort of changed and decided that they didn't want to pursue a music career anymore and were more interested in doing the church thing. So always music focused, but just in a different context.
Okay. So you must have been pretty involved in the church as well. And
yeah, when I kind
of got into music through them as well.
Yes. Yeah. There are 5 kids in my family. All of us are musical and we all just grew up playing. I mean, I didn't even think about it as being involved or not involved. It just was life.
Okay.
Like playing, because my parents would like run the music team at whatever church we were going to as kids. And so we would just, I mean, I didn't really like, I was very young when all that was happening, but it was just part of our lives. So we would just like sing at Christmas time,
mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. And then, yeah. And then as I got older, that really the first couple of songs that I wrote were like as a teenager writing like church choruses.
Okay.
Which was kind of, again, it's a nice sort of stress-free environment to try your hand at writing music.
Right. And have like a built-in audience.
Exactly. Just force 200 people to sing a song that you just wrote.
Yeah. Or watch you perform one.
Or watch me. Exactly.
Well, what was the first instrument you learned how to play?
Piano. I grew up playing, we learned Suzuki. So we learned like playing by ear. My dad was a Suzuki. Funnily, my dad was a Suzuki flute teacher. And I did learn the flute a little bit, but not that much. So this is part of like my dad's so chill. You would think like he was a flute teacher. Why wouldn't he teach all of his kids the flute? But I don't think any of us really wanted to learn it. And he was like, okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
So yeah, piano. And then it wasn't until really in my 20s that I like picked up a guitar.
Really? Is that when you started? I mean, obviously this, the career you have now is, singer-songwriter, guitar kind of driven, but like with piano, were you writing songs on piano prior and like performing out? I mean,
yeah, I wasn't performing them out places. Once I started once I transitioned into like playing music outside of a church context and just like kind of doing it as an artist, that's when my first few gigs, I had like a friend who would play guitar for me. And I remember one time bringing my dad's guitar to a show, being like, I'm going to play guitar tonight. And at the end of the show, my friend, the guitarist, was like, you shouldn't do that. I mean, I was pretty bad. And it's funny, like, I'm still not a good guitarist. Like, I'm fine. I can do what I need to do, and I can make the guitar sound how I need to sound for my songs. But I am not a good guitarist. And I don't have any ego about that. I wish I was better. But I kind of I learned to do it by necessity because it's so annoying to travel with a piano. It's so much
Oh
easier
yeah.
to
I
just
mean,
travel with a guitar. But that's kind of what I did for a lot of those early gigs. So I just kind of forced myself to just have to learn how to play
guitar. You kind of use it as like a vehicle to write and perform your songs out?
And I do find it interesting as a songwriter. I write differently depending on what instrument I write on. So the guitar also like then opened up a different style of writing and a different way of hearing melody and stuff. Just I think naturally because I can only play in like G or C. So you sort of I ended up writing a lot of songs in those keys.
I think it's funny that you said that it wasn't as like, with a piano, it's not as easy to travel with. I interviewed a guy, Andrew McMahon. Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, but he had a couple other bands, and we were talking about the first band he was in, something corporate, and like he toured with a grand piano. Like he would push the thing. Like he was like, was that like adamant?
Oh my God.
I'm like, why did you not just use a keyboard? He's like, we needed the grand, I'd push it through like the, back of a dive bar in Denver or whatever it was. I just thought that was wild. Ridiculous.
I mean, in terms of the moment on stage, I get it. Like when you can't compare a real piano to a keyboard. It's not just about the sound, it's the feel, it's you can't compare it. So I understand that instinct, but for me, the process of like touring and just the hassle, oh my God. By that point, I'd get on stage and I'd be so resentful that I had to wheel the thing in.
You're like, I don't even want to play.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So you said in your 20s is when you picked up guitar and started writing songs?
Yeah,
or was it
I would
prior?
have been 21, 22, I think, was when I first played guitar.
And when was that after you had already begun songwriting and knew you wanted to pursue that?
Didn't know that I wanted to pursue it. I had written some church songs. So I knew that I could write a song. I wasn't writing with the intention of like really performing them outside of that context at all. The guitar came about because I got a job. I was 21. I got a job at a children's hospital for a children's charity in Melbourne. And we used to do ward rounds. So I worked with like a team of people that would do like distraction therapy. So we would host kids in our space, or we would go and visit kids on the wards and basically just try and make them laugh and stuff while they're having procedures done, or just distract them from the environment of the hospital.
That's
and I encouraged.
That's a cool thing. Yeah.
I did it for 10 years. So actually, funnily, my only other, because I didn't go to university or anything. So really my only two skills in life are music or childcare.
But entertaining children, I mean, that takes
entertaining
a lot
children.
Of skill.
It does take a lot of skill. I mostly played Mario Kart and just like thrashed 10-year-olds at Mario Kart. That was kind of my approach. But one of the things that we would do is on our ward rounds, they encouraged us to use whatever skills we had, and some of my teammates would do like magic tricks or kind of jokes or like balloon making and things. And there was a crappy old guitar, so I just grabbed that and kind of forced myself to learn. So that's really the first moment that I played a guitar. And just like in the very safe environment of the wards of the Royal Children's Hospital, just like hacked out, You Are My Sunshine on guitar.
Okay.
And taught myself how to play. And that was really the first, I ended up writing a song with one of the kids on one of the wards, about the hospital, and showed it to my bosses, and they were so impressed that they then flew me around the country to sing it at all of their fundraisers. And that experience was a transition between being just a dude who like played music on the side to realizing that I actually enjoyed it and could see a way for it to be my career.
what like validating moment there at the church
Yeah.
or not at the hospital. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then like, so I played it. I remember at the fundraiser in Sydney, and like they raised just like a shitload of money from like that night. Not just because of me, but I'm sure I was just part of this like very celebratory night. And I was like, this was fun. And then I played it in Adelaide, and I played it in Brisbane and Perth, and just like all around the country, got to tell the story and play the song, see the impact that that whole thing had on people. And I was like, this is very fun. Like if music was this, I could do this. And that was really
Mhm.
when I began like writing songs that were not remotely like religious. They just were songs about life and about people around me and things. And yeah, that's where it
It-
happened.
did you release that song? The one that
No,
you're talking about?
there's a video of it on YouTube, but I nearly put it on my first album. And it's I have these certain songs in my life. I don't know why this is, but I get in my head about them, and we never end up putting out a version of it. But I've always thought maybe one day I would. It's called Let Your Light, and it's on YouTube if you kind of look it up. And I wrote it with a 13-year-old eating disorder patient um, at the Monash Hospital in Melbourne.
Wow, that is really
Yeah,
incredible. I'm looking it up right after this. That is
great.
such a cool story.
Yeah,
And then that ended up leading into pursuing this and then writing your first
that was
record.
just the like awakening from my brain. I was studying screenwriting at the time. I thought I was going to be a filmmaker, and that experience of playing that song for essentially it was like but between all of the fundraising events, there was thousands of people around the country.
Mhm.
That was the moment that I was like, oh, music could be amazing. Like this is a really great feeling
Mhm.
outside of church. I already knew music itself was an amazing experience, but just performing, I was like, this is really special, and I think I'm good at it.
Sure.
Um,
Wow.
so yeah, that was really when I remember after that being like, I should do this. I should organize a gig, and I should write more songs, and I should, so then I started like friends heard, that I was interested in doing it. And like a friend of mine asked me to like open for her at one of her little shows she played in Melbourne. We were literally just the storefront window of some like restaurant. So we're just like, we set up a little PA, and I played, you know, very badly on my piano, a little keyboard and ukulele and guitar while people were eating a risotto. But it was great. Like I think I'd kind of, it's like they say, you kind of, I was bitten by the bug, and that was it.
Mhm. And from there, it obviously led into writing that first record, Sirens,
Exactly.
and with that album, did you like what was the next kind of step from when that record came out or getting to
Well,
that record, I guess?
that, I mean, getting to the record was a slow process. I have this curse of taking a long time to make records. The first album really took about 5 or 6 years to make, as did this new album.
Mhm.
I will say the first album is what got me signed to my first record label in the States, which was secretly Canadian.
Mhm.
And it got me my management, which I still have. I've got 2 US managers. I mean, the first album really just like opened up the world to me. I'd funded it through crowdfunding. I made it with some friends. We were just fully self-releasing. And then I think once I got it out, it started to find its way to the people. And then that's what kind of brought me over to the US. And then once I got to the US with that album, that's when I sort of started showing all these other songs that I had that I didn't know what to do with, which is what got me a publishing deal with Sony. And it's
And a
just one
bunch of
thing
co-writes
led
from
to
there. Is
another.
that when you started
Exactly.
co-writing with people?
Yeah,
Okay. And
that's
was that
right.
a majority of your time was just spent after, I mean, after the fact? I mean, the record came out 2014 and
That's
the
right.
new one recently. So with all those years in between, was it a lot of just writing with people and writing
Yeah.
for other people?
Yeah. So my first ever co-write came from, there's a young Aussie artist called Wafia, and she,
Oh, I've interviewed her.
oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So she has a song called Heartburn.
Hmm.
And that was a song that I had written on my guitar, a chorus that I'd written on my guitar that I didn't know what to do with. And we were just, when we first became friends, we met through a mutual friend in Melbourne while Wafi was in Melbourne once.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were trading like ideas of songs that we didn't know what to do with. And I showed her that song, and she was like, can you send that to me? And I sent it to her. And at the time it was just I would just play it on guitar. It was just that, tell me why does my heart burn? It was very like bluesy, kind of gung, 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 gung. When I see your face, you have made your decision. send it to her as a voice memo. And then she was like, I want this song. And I was like, okay, great. And then she said, should we write it together? And I'd never done that before. I'd written with people before, but just kind of for fun, never like another artist asking me to contribute to their kind of songwriting bank. So we wrote it together. It ended up getting produced. It came out. People loved it. And then my managers were like, "Oh, you can like write for other people," and I was like, "Okay."
So, sure, I guess.
Yeah, like so. Then when I came over, so when I was touring my first album, there were a couple of things that kind of were interesting about the release of it, and because I'd put it out myself first, and then re-released it with the label, and it just sort of, it was kind of gearing up for like, let's get into it, and then like within a month, this cycle was kind of done, and there was just this moment of like treading water of like, oh, what happens next? Like this album kind of is come and gone. And in that time, my managers were like, what if we just got you writing with people while we figure out what to do next? We were trying to get tours and stuff for that album. And it wasn't really quite coming together. So they said, let's just get you in sessions. And it was in that time that I met Kesha. And we just instantly got along and ended up writing together. And then, it's like anything, like once there's word of mouth about like, oh, there's this new like dude who's in town writing songs. My managers were able to just kind of use that and convince people to let me come and write songs with them. Sure. And that's when then it led to like 3 or 4 years of just writing with people. It's funny, like I haven't done, compared to my other friends, I moved to LA right around the same month that Sarah Aarons did. Sarah Aarons is a prolific like hit machine. Compared to Sarah Aarons, I've written like 2 songs. But I think I found a good rhythm with it, like where I just found the right people and the right kind of rooms to be in. I don't write hits, but I enjoy writing. I always get the sort of emotional moment on a record. I'm always like the track where it's like, okay, now we're gonna like really sing from the heart. Like that's when they bring me in.
Well, that's special, and you do write hits.
I'll take it. Well, I can't afford a house yet, but we're getting there.
Not many can, right?
Yeah,
especially if you're still in LA.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what leads you to start writing this new record and going back to being putting something out as an artist, a solo artist?
Well, psychologically I was always like focused on being an artist, but I guess there was definitely a moment where it felt like that there wasn't a lot of energy happening around my stuff as an artist, and it was more happening around my stuff as a writer. So I was pretty happy to kind of not even hit pause on it, but to just focus on the writing stuff. And then also right around that time, I was transitioning from Secretly Canadian to Atlantic Records. Just record deals are really complex, and it basically took 2 years to move from one label to another, just between lawyers and figuring out like, what does this look like? And because I was on like a 3 record deal or something with the last guys, and I loved Secretly, like they are an amazing label and stuff, but it was all very like amicable, and they were fully on board with me moving and stuff. But I think just because that took a long time, there was just a moment of, again, like treading water. But once that was settled, and I then was working with Craig Kalman at Atlantic Records, who became my A&R, I think then we were really like, okay, it's time to like focus on what this new album is going to be. And then incidentally, the years between the first album and the second album, just outside of music, my life just took such a unpredictable sort of turn of events. So then that all just fed into the music. And in that time, I was also writing my own stuff and writing into the experiences that I was going through. So once it became clear that we were ready to make a new album, I kind of had a bank of songs ready to go that I was able to show Craig and go, hey, what do you think of these? And he, for the most part, was into it.
And there's, obviously, you on your Instagram, you wrote a note, and it's kind of
Yeah.
the backs and with all of that kind of was what became this record, or is those the
Yeah.
stories that
So
kind of became this
that's
record?
right. That's right. So right as the first album came out, basically, having grown up in church and being so involved, and as I've just sort of talked to you about,
Mm-hmm.
there was in the years following that first album, just a lot of my experience of faith just really kind of unraveled because I entered these years of, really questioning and challenging what my sexuality was and what my faith in God was. And this woman that we were really settled on kind of getting married.
Mm-hmm.
That relationship derailed, and it was a really crazy, tumultuous time, all in the midst of like writing Praying with Kesha and writing for Demi Lovato
Yeah.
and then when I would then go away from those sessions, I would go home and just write my own songs that then ended up on this record. And the
Okay.
first few songs that I wrote for myself from the album were Runaway, um, I Am Here, Boy in a Bubble. Those are the songs that were Requiem was another very early one. Those were all written during this like very crazy time of questioning. And again, like because I was then like I'd like Praying was happening and on the radio and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When I would go home and like write a song like Requiem, I just didn't even think of it as like, oh, one day I'm going to perform this, or like one day this is going to be on the radio or anything like that. Like it was very much, I just wrote the song because I needed to write to process what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the songs themselves, like I didn't enter the album going, okay, I think I've lost my faith in God. I don't know what my sexuality is. Let's write some hits. Like
Right.
it was not that. I was just going through it and writing these songs. And then after the fact, when I finally met with Craig and he was like, show me what you've been working on, I handed him like 30 songs, in the midst of which were all these tunes, and all of them were written during this crazy time of my life. So it felt easy to kind of go, this is what I would love to tell as a story on this album. And I think it's here in these demos, and we just have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of pick through and find what tells the story the best.
And going back to Kesha real quick, the most recent single is based on what, something that she had said with Another Falling Star.
Oh yeah. So Another Falling Star is kind of, it's singular on the album because I think it actually subconsciously connects to the central theme, but it is a little bit of its own kind of short story on the record. Um, but I wrote it with my friend Cara Salamando, who I'd done sessions with. She's like a session writer in LA,
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal writer. And we both were really not enjoying songwriting sessions in LA. And I remember one day were like, let's just hang out with a piano, just the two of us, and let's just write something for us. Like, not, because back in the day when we first met, every session was like, let's write a Selena Gomez song, or like, let's try and write something just like for Haley Steinfeld, like just kind of soul destroying stuff. Cause it's not like Selena or Haley knew us or wanted us to write them songs. We're just writing. People would just ask us to like imagine that they would love what we're going to say. So we were like, okay, we're just going to do one for us. And at the beginning of the session, when I got to her house, Kesha called me, and I knew Kesha obviously enough to have her number, but we weren't like, now we're very good friends, but at the time we were still getting to know each other. So enough that
Mm-hmm.
like, if Kesha calls, like you pick up, you
You have to
answer the
answer.
phone. You don't like, if Kesha called me right now, I'd be like, no, like I'm in the middle of something.
I would ask you to answer.
Imagine just on speakerphone. So I remember answering, and Kesha's so funny and kind of wild, just immediately launched into this monologue about how the night before she had gotten stoned with Dana Carvey and David Spade in Hollywood. And I'd remembered she'd texted me the night before being like, what are you up to? And I was like asleep in bed. So as I was like, oh, okay. Sounds like you had a fun night. And obviously Kara's just sitting there watching me like, what is going on? And then I said the phrase, something along the lines of like, oh, so, okay. So you got high in Hollywood. That's exciting. Anyway, then hung up the phone. And I was like, Kara, I'm so sorry. And she was like, no. She was like, did you get high in Hollywood is a great line for a song. So then we sat down and kind of unpacked, like, what could that mean? What could that be about? And then we wrote the song Another Falling Star about that. And then what's funny is because that's purely the connection to Kesha. That's it. Then we, like, the song itself, we kind of wrote almost, it was a little bit satirical about like our friends that we've seen come to Hollywood chasing their dreams and how it kind of, is it really worth it? And it doesn't really always work out. Um, but I'd never really thought about the overall theme of the song being about like a kind of fallen star. So then I would tell people, oh, Kesha inspired this song.
Oh man.
And I just didn't think about, because it's technically true. She didn't, but it wasn't until much later that I realized that sounds like I'm saying, oh, well, yeah, like Kesha's this like failed falling
Right,
star.
exactly. And that wasn't even the intent whatsoever.
No. And Kesha was like, did I really inspire that song? And I was like, yeah, because you got high in Hollywood with David Spade. And she was like, oh, she was like, I thought you were calling like me a falling star. I was like, what? No.
Yeah.
So I felt bad about that. But yeah, she likes the song. I'm actually trying to convince her to do like a duet version with me.
She should. That'd be awesome.
Right? I think she will. She loves me. So
yeah. She did a duet thing with my friend's band, the Struts. She did a song with them, like with the song Body Talks. Yeah, she sang like and I was like, this is so cool.
She's the best. I think people, it's one of those funny things. A lot of this happens with a lot of famous people I know. It's like the comedian thing where the personality of the human being is so different to the personality of the comedian that they present to the world. And sometimes famous people are like this as well. And the kind of party girl, I think undermines sometimes. I mean, she is a party girl. That is her, but also she's genuinely one of the smartest, hardest working. Like, I think she has like a genius level IQ.
Right. Yeah.
Legitimately, like, and I think that a lot of people don't realize that she's like so switched on. Her taste is incredible. She writes all of her songs, except for Praying, which I helped write. But yeah, she's genius. I love her. She's the best.
And I think, and I love that you said that, because I think a lot of artists don't get that sort of acknowledgement once they,
well, because to be honest,
level,
some artists put their name on songs, and you're like, I know you didn't write that song. Like, I just know. I've been in the room with some people that like take credit for songs, and you're like, okay, you're overselling that a little bit. Whereas with Kesha, it really is true. Like, she's a phenomenal writer, and she's a great person. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I saw the video that you did. I think it's for that song, right? Where you're on the roof, or you're on the double-decker bus.
Yeah. That was so I do this series of I call them walk and sings. It's just because I don't know, it sounds like a catchy name. Where it's all one take and the audio is performed live. The vocal is performed live. So we sing to a track. Different, like I have a couple of, there's also a music video for that song, which is different. But yeah, we shot that on a double-decker bus driving through Hollywood on a Friday night, which I cannot recommend. It was very hectic, so noisy. And it's funny, a lot of those walk and sings, people will be like, I don't think this is live. I'm pretty sure that you've dubbed this vocal. But on that one, you can very clearly, you can hear the bus. You're like, there's a lot of bus on this song.
How many of those have you done? And like, how do you decide on location?
Location's always tough. We try and connect it to the song, and then sometimes we're just like, this is a cool location. I think I've done 7 of them. But I've done 2 for songs that are not on the record. And then on the record, we did one for War in Your Arms, Falling Star, Requiem, Runaway. Yeah. I did shoot one in London for Friendly Fire. But something went wrong with the microphone and one of the high notes, so we couldn't use the audio. But I was so upset about it because in the take that we would have used, because we usually end up doing about 5 or 6 takes. In the take that we would have used, there's when I listen back to the camera audio, you don't hear it through my lapel, but through the camera audio, in the background, it's a blur, but you see this figure like cross into frame, and it's this guy yelling, "Shut the fuck up! Fucking shut up!" We're just like singing on some street in like suburban London. He's like, "Shut the fuck up! Fucking shut up!" I was so devastated that we couldn't. I mean, I'll share the clip to my Instagram at some point.
I was gonna say you needed to share that. That's
I'll
hilarious.
just share that clip. Yeah, but it's pretty amazing. Yeah, so it's definitely live. People generally are fine with us singing, but that did happen in London.
But you just go out on the street and do it. It's not like, okay, we're gonna shut this down. We're just gonna see what happens.
Yeah, we just even we did some in New York. I did one with Bryn Cartelli, and there's in one of the shots you can see there's just this woman like standing there watching us like walk past singing, and she's just like staring as we pass.
She's like, "Oh, this is normal. No big deal."
It's funny. It's exactly. She's like, "New York, another day in New York." Right. I think there is something like when you've got headphones on, like literally the headphones I'm wearing are the ones that we use. When you've got headphones on, it's amazing how easy it is to just disappear into your own world. And just like I sing and I'm not self-conscious about the fact that there are pedestrians. Clearly I'm not, because they can scream at me to shut the fuck up and I don't even notice.
Yeah. Well, I definitely can't wait to see that clip. That sounds so funny.
I'm gonna have to post it. I'll do it soon.
That's awesome. And I really appreciate your time, Ben. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out.
My pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. I do have one more quick question. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
It's a good question, and it's a tough one because I just feel like the industry has changed so much since I was coming up. And I sort of feel out of touch sometimes now with what is going on. I suppose my biggest thing when I look at young artists, and because I've even just started a record label with my managers, and we've been looking for like what are the kind of young artists that we would be looking to sign. I think for me, the biggest thing is authenticity, regardless of the genre, regardless of the type of music you're making or the way that you want to even conduct yourself as an artist, whether you're Kesha or Bob Dylan. I think one thing that I feel we're losing, or we have the risk of losing a bit with all the social media and algorithm and TikTok and things, is everyone's so good at impersonating each other, and everyone's so good at like being an avatar of someone else's ideas, or like just copying what someone's done and putting their spin on it, which is fine. And people can be very talented. But what to me stands out from like any crowd is someone that's so in touch with themselves and with just being a very authentic, honest version of themselves. That sings louder than any hot voice to me. And I think that's what I would be saying to anyone who's young and kind of coming up in the business, or just looking to kind of make a career out of it, is like, don't do the thing that you think everyone else is doing or wants you to do. Like, you just have to kind of fight to be the most authentic. If you were left in the room and there were no cameras and there was no audience and there was nobody watching, what would you do? And then find a way to like do that for the rest of your life.